Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this is a special edition. Not that you can tell the difference, but it is in that this is sort of originally I was going to call this a creepy Christmas ? But it might be both a creepy and concerning Christmas stories podcast ? Maybe not a ? Kind of thing. And whenever I need help with literature and interpreting media and things like that, I can always turn to my resident poet laureate / lawyer / Facebook friend and friend from the Maryland Lawyers Facebook group who prefers art to law, but who doesn't really, and a repeat guest, Jennifer Sutherland. So how are you, award-winning poet Jennifer Sutherland?
I'm good.
Are you an award-winning lawyer as well?
Theoretically.
Okay, yeah. There you go. Listen, I've got two AV, preeminent lawyers plaques. I'm pointing like anyone else could see it in my office. So, and I do have a certificate of appreciation from the Court of Appeals of Maryland for being on the peer review council. So, council, whatever. Anyway, I've already told Jennifer that I'm going to beg her indulgence for a little bit. Not about that puffery, which I just did, because it's partly it's all true, but I don't really care about that stuff, especially at this age and how old they are. But I want to make a couple announcements about the show, and I have decided to change the title of the show finally. So I'm working on new show art. I'm working on getting it changed through the RSS feeds. Now, what does working on it mean? It means I'm waiting for somebody smarter than me to tell me how to change it on the RSS feed so nobody has to change their subscription or find a new show, and they'll just automatically be there. What's the change in the name? Garden of Thought. Maybe Garden of Thoughts, but I think Garden of Thought. It is free, nobody's using it, and I think it more aptly describes the show. Believe it or not, I have lost guests in the past due to the name of the show. And this is not a new thing. This is going back 3+ years. I've just sort of ignored it, but it's always bothered me. Partly because I invested in the name Garden of Doom, got a trademark, hard to fight a little bit with the makers of the video game Doom and the movie Doom, which I thought was sort of a little bit funny, but still had to spend a little bit of money on that. And I really do love my show art. But but the same person's doing it, and I think we can just tweak it a little bit to keep the theme of it with make it a little bit less scary looking to to the normies out there who are listening. So that's it. But I'm lying to you right now a little bit because this is a Christmas show that we have just put together very quickly, even though we're doing it a couple days after Christmas. It is leapfrogging 2 recorded shows I already have in the can, and probably by the time I get this all worked out, probably at least another 2 or 3 shows that I record. So you'll be hearing this probably 4 to 6 weeks before you actually see anything. But that's the difference. The show won't change at all, except maybe I'll get some guests to say yes who would have normally said no, but I don't know. Anyway, that's the announcement. Here you have it. Without further ado, Jennifer, this was your fault because you posted something on Facebook where you said you've been watching a lot of Christmas shows that are for kids and you're a little bit concerned. And I'm like, light bulb or Christmas ornament goes on over my head, or North Star or whatever we want to say. And I'm like, this sounds like a show. And like a good soldier, like a wooden soldier, you agreed.
I did. I hope that I will not be shooting off any cannons like the Wooden Shoulder Soldiers and March of the Wooden Soldiers, which is one of the movies we're going to talk about. But
let's get started. And you saw like so one thing you should know about Jennifer is while she is an artist, she's also a lawyer, and she always sends me a PDF of what she's gonna talk about, and today's was 6 pages. So, so first I had to get up from my phone to get to my computer because it's too small for me to read on my phone, even with my glasses. And then there was some that was in blue font where she inserted it was sort of like a Mad Libs where she inserted things in there, and I had to really squint to get to those. And so I had a couple of, I saved most of my comments for the conversation, obviously, but I had a couple that I couldn't let go because I was afraid I was going to forget them. So you got them both. You've seen them. I see your face is illuminated on the messenger. So obviously you saw them. So we'll get to them in due course. But yeah, start from the start. What inspired you to take up this course, and what troubled you so that you went public with it and then agreed to come on this show?
Well, the post that I made was about the Laurel and Hardy picture, Babes in Toyland, which is what I remember it being called when I was a kid and was watching it on television around the holidays. It's also known as the March of the Wooden Soldiers. It's a film from 1934, and it's a Laurel and Hardy picture. And for people who maybe don't know who Laurel and Hardy were, they were like a Tin Pan Alley comedy act, something like Abbott and Costello, which people also possibly don't know anything about. But
right.
They were a team of comedians who did a series of films, and their shtick was they were very childlike and naive. Stan, I always get them mixed up. It's Oliver and Hardy. Oliver is like the big round guy, or it's Laurel and Hardy. Oliver Hardy is like the big round guy.
He's like a fat
Stan
Charlie
Laurel
Chaplin.
is the thin guy.
He's basically a very fat Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
And
he's got the hair like that's cut very straight across his forehead, and this like what we would call now, I think, like goth bangs. And they would do like very physical comedy, lots of sort of poking and jumping up and down and stuff.
The Three Stooges before there were Three Stooges, except there were 2 of them, and the skinny guy, his thing is he would often cry like a baby over routine setbacks.
Yeah, he wore like a pork pie hat, and and Stan was always sort of talking down to him. You can see, watching these films, you see all of the different influences, both before and after, and sort of comedy. I think Penn and Teller owe a lot to Laurel and Hardy. But anyway, this was a film that would come on, in my recollection, around the holidays every year, and it is the weirdest thing you have ever seen. And I remember being a kid and just being really freaked out by some of the scenes In particular, there's a team or there's this sort of army of boogeymen who attack the town, which is like a nursery rhyme town where Laurel and Hardy live. And there are all of these nursery rhyme characters that are part of this town. And it's a very weird, very bizarre story that's marketed to kids, or that was meant for kids.
Right, it's sort of like Whoville, except Whoville is populated by like Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen tales, which are topics I do want to explore on Garden of Thoughts in the future, and give them their individual due. Once I can find people who actually can tell me about the content, because of course the whole concept of this show is I have people tell me about it, so I don't have to do the work myself. I mean, we get that. But yeah, and when you went over the plot of, I'm going to put this on the front end, not the back end. When I was reading, I'm like, I wonder if It's a Wonderful Life is a weird adaptation of Babes in Toyland, because there's a lot of parallels there. And so audience, keep that, pinned in your head as you listen going forward. Because it probably sounds really weird now, but it might sound less weird in a little bit.
Yeah, I want to hear you bring those two together, because I'm not sure I see the connection.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm sure that there is one. It's, you could think of this as being like an early kind of meta story, because it's very aware of itself as a story, and it includes these characters who are all based on well-known story characters. So this town is inhabited by nursery rhyme characters. There are the three pigs, one of whom is sort of allegedly kidnapped by the bad guy, whose name is Silas Barnaby. And who does, I do see a little bit of maybe Potter in Silas Barnaby. I can see where you're coming potentially with that. There's little Bo Peep, who is like the love interest of the picture. And there is a very strange Mickey Mouse character who it's very clearly intended to be Mickey Mouse. He's wearing the little shorts with the big buttons and the suspenders, but he's not Mickey Mouse. He's like an ersatz Mickey Mouse, because I think they probably couldn't get the rights to use the character, but he's in there. And the whole sort of basis for this story is...
Wait, don't skip over the Mickey Mouse thing, because the weirdest part of all is the Mickey Mouse character is actually played by an actual monkey in a costume.
Yes. There's a monkey who's wearing this costume and therefore is sort of like jumping and scurrying around. It's very disturbing.
Yeah.
There's a cat who plays the cello. And all of these, with the exception of the Mickey Mouse played by a monkey, these animal characters are played by people in animal costumes. So the three little pigs are played by people in costumes that look like they came out of like a 90s era torture porn movie. If you put like a chainsaw in the hands of the three little pigs characters, it would not look like it does not belong in Hostel. Like it just...
Right. Or more recently, the Pooh, Blood and Honey movies, yeah. and that the Mickey Mouse horror movie. By the way, no one should watch any of those movies. They're not even so bad they're good. They're just bad.
Well, and I'm going to say I have not seen any of those movies, although I'm aware that they exist. But I think part of what those movies are thriving on is part of what films like what we're talking about today are thriving on, which is forcing people to sort of confront the ways that they ordinarily perceive things. And when you take them out of the situation and make them look in from the outside, they understand things about what they had just kind of gotten along with before.
I get it. The innocuous creatures which epitomize materialism are killing us. I get it. And I agree with the concept. However, if you saw these movies, you would realize that they could have done it and made it like average horror movies. They didn't make average horror movies. They made subpar bad movies.
Well, they couldn't get the funding.
Probably.
It's a critique of capitalism, possibly.
I guess they made sequels. I mean, and anyway, I'm veering us off topic here.
All right, so back to Toyland, where Oliver and Hardy are, with the exception of a couple of the characters, like one of the few human inhabitants of this town. It's a lot of these people in animal costumes. There's the little old lady who lives in a shoe is in the town. But the evil character is this Silas Barnaby person who is the landlord, basically,
right,
and who decides that he wants to marry Bo Peep.
Sure.
And she refuses because Silas Barnaby is not an attractive character. He's actually, the actor who played him was, I think, 20 or 21 or something at the time. Very good-looking man. It was a strange casting decision, but again, I think that's part of what plays into the overall weird feel of the film, the unreality of it, the unheimlichness of it. You put this good-looking, strong, like, actor who would ordinarily be the lead role in a romance, and you put weird hair on him and dress him up and make him bend over, and you make him like sort of the old crooked man. He wants to marry Bo Peep, and he's Bo Peep's love interest. So Silas Barnaby sets him up and arranges for the pig-napping of one of the three pig characters. There's a scene that is very disturbing in which someone arrives and sort of plops these links of sausages in front of everyone and implies that the kidnapped little pig has been turned into sausages.
Right, sure, of course.
And he accuses he accuses the good-looking guy's character of having kidnapped and turned into sausage the little pig. And the rest of the movie plays out with Laurel and Hardy kind of galvanizing the town to oppose Silas Barnaby. They fight a war against him and his army of boogeymen. And at the very end, the war is resolved by activating an army of wooden soldiers who are like these wind-up sort of nutcracker-looking soldiers. And they all come marching in and attack the boogeymen and overwhelm them and drive Silas Barnaby out of Toyland and make it safe again for all of the nursery rhyme characters. And it turns out that the little pig is fine. He has not been turned into sausage, so...
Well, some little pig was turned into sausage. Just not this little pig.
Just not the awful weird one with the little eyes and the strange mask.
Or maybe in Toyland, it's a human that gets turned into sausage. Maybe they don't, there's no pig cannibalism.
There is no saying.
That.
There is a critique of this film that places it within the context of its time, which was a picture that was being made in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
This was, the time in which Hitler was rising to prominence in Germany. There were all sorts of anti-Semitic sentiments, obviously in Germany, but very much so in the United States, and that was part of what was going on in a lot of the isolationist tendencies of the country at that point. Silas Barnaby, you could read, and a lot of people have read, as being a grotesque stereotype of a Jewish landlord. And people have read similar things about the team of, or the army of bogeymen, that they look like savages, like black characters who are savage and only capable of violence and stupid and all of those things. So there's a political reading of this film that I think juxtaposed against the fact that it is supposed to be a light kind of nursery rhyme story is part of what is responsible for it being as disturbing as it can be.
Right, it's a little Bolshevik, and yeah, we're getting into the rise of the Nazis, but we're also just leaving the rise of Prussia, Germany as a country, World War One, and these Nutcracker soldiers, they do look a little Prussian Kazakh-y, which with the sort of the beefeater hats, but different. There is a very Russian look to them, Northern European soldiery, and they do what's that called? Whether it's lockstep or
I think it's called lockstep. Are you talking about goose stepping?
Yeah, goose stepping. They are goose stepping. I mean, they're wooden, but they're goose stepping. I mean, human beings, still try to mimic this when they're marching in formations in certain armies to show how disciplined and in shape they are. But yeah, there's definitely that. These things are, they're a little scary looking in hindsight, and they're the heroes coming to liberate the town. Now, where do I get the It's a Wonderful Life? I mean, obviously, if you take away the lovely characters and replace them with a lovely family, you have a man who's behind on his mortgage, and they're threatening him with foreclosure, and that's what Silas Barnaby was always doing. Now, his blood price was a bride price, which is a constant trope of fairy tales and stories forever. You always sort of avoid payment of a tax by giving away your daughter or whatever. Who of course is a princess or so beautiful that she should be a princess. That's the way these things go. But in poor It's a Wonderful Life, he was constantly trying to do good things and do good deeds all along the way, and the evil bank was trying to get him. Now, in his case, the community at the last second rallied behind him because of all the good deeds he did, and they saved his Christmas. But the underlying trope is the same. The bank doesn't care. It's inhuman. It's trying to get rid of the nice guys who are trying to do the right thing, for their blood price, in this case, plain old money. Even during the Christmas spirit, and so that's where I see this as sort of a glazed over modern adaptation. And It's a Wonderful Life was also when was it was it in the 40s or the 50s?
I think it's the 40s.
Yeah, so it's very much in the wake of World War II and sort of the communist scare, and it too is a little bit of the American spirit. We're worried about the being too greedy, but us Americans, we're good natured and good hearted, and we'll help each other out when we have to. The Christian charity comes at home and saves the day. So that's where I got that from. Maybe just when you read something, 35 minutes before a show and you read it quickly, you see other things. But that's where I got that from. But I may have to check these movies out, back to back and see if I come to the same conclusion. But yeah, a little creepy, a little Christmas time. I also thought that the movie was called March of the Wooden Soldiers. I guess just because that's the iconic image, and the song bum ba-da-da-dum bum 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 bum, which isn't that part of the Nutcracker? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So see, I'm classy. So yeah. All right. So yeah, but definitely a little bit creepy there, complete with your Grimm's fairy tale, and nightmare fuel for to keep kids in line forever, being the victims again of maybe the conniving Jew.
I think there's some of that at work in It's a Wonderful Life too.
There you go. See, now you're seeing it. Now you're getting on board. It's still Garden of Doom now. So, all right. So, I mean, if you want to expound on that, that's wonderful, because I'm sure you can do a better job of it. If you want to move on to our next movie or media property that gave you pause, that's fine too.
Well, I want to talk a little bit before we talk about the next picture about my framing of this idea, which or this the weirdness that we're talking about when we're talking about these movies, and where I'm getting some of my thinking is from a critic called Mark Fisher, who wrote amongst a number of books, and he wrote widely in a lot of different venues. He wrote for Wired. He wrote for a lot of different journals. But one of his books is called The Weird and the Eerie. And it came out in 2017 through a press that he founded, Repeater Press. And he was a theorist, a music critic, a political critic, based in the UK. He taught at Goldsmiths at the University of London. So this was not, like an idiot. I mean, he was brilliant. I mean, Mark Fisher was a brilliant thinker. Sadly, he committed suicide shortly before the publication of this book, The Weird and the Eerie. He had struggled with depression, I think, for most of his life. But this book is a really, really interesting way of thinking about a lot of the films, the media, the books, the literature that we have been looking at in the 20th century. Some of the examples of the things that he's looking at, he looks at stories by Lovecraft, Tim Powers, people who read fantasy literature. He looks at films by Fassbinder, Philip K. Dick, Stanley Kubrick, Andrei Tarkovsky. I mean, he's looking at all of these kinds of greats in the world of creepy horror, sci-fi stuff. And his theory, or his way of looking at this, is that we lost a lot with Freud. We lost a lot with Freud's framing of the idea of the eerie, in which Freud sort of looks at this as uncanny valley stuff. And uncanny valley stuff is, and this is another children's picture. It's another Christmas movie. If you remember when the Polar Express came out, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, however long that was one of the first, I think, CGI animated films that they did. And all anybody could talk about was these characters and how dead their eyes were. They had these very dead eye appearances. And people started talking about Uncanny Valley and how we react to these little tiny things that make us understand that we're in the world of something that is off. And that derives from Freud's thinking about the eerie as being unheimlich, something that reminds us or tells us that we're not at home.
Right.
This is not the ordinary. He says, Mark Fisher says, that we should be, the idea of weird and eerie should be much broader than that. And that really it's, the hairs on the back of our neck rise, it's because we're reacting to something that is making us see something that we have not perceived before. Something that we have been blind to for whatever reason. Because we're used to it, because it's hidden from us, because it's behind us, and suddenly we're turning around to face it. And I think his thinking about the weird and eerie is kind of my thinking about a lot of the movies and what we're talking about today, for whatever that's worth. And I think, with the March of the Wooden Soldiers, one of the things that movie is doing, and why it kind of, at least it set me on edge watching this as a kid, and then as I come back to it almost every year to watch it, is what it does with narrative, and what it does with these very familiar fairy tale narratives, the nursery rhyme stuff that we grow up with, and kind of pulling them into this broader picture, forcing us to look at the fact that these stories aren't just stories, that they are part of a narrative that we might be dealing with on a daily basis. And I think also confronting us potentially with some of our own prejudices. I mean, I think it's uncomfortable to watch characters like Silas Barnaby, because, at least for white people who aren't Jewish, seeing a character portrayed that way forces us to wonder what other kind of prejudices are we holding inside of us that this movie is confronting us with. And I'm not saying that was an intention of the filmmaker when they made it. In fact, I suspect that it was like they didn't even think about it.
Right.
But I think that's part of what's going on when a movie like this makes us feel uncomfortable.
There's a pretty good chance that the producers or the studio owners we're Jewish. I mean, the Metro Goldwyn Mayer, we're all, so, as were the Marx Brothers, and I think pretty much, well, I'm not sure about the Marx Brothers, but, anyway, it probably was unconscious, and it worked for the story, in some ways simpler times, in other ways maybe too simple, I guess is what we're saying. And the boogeyman thing, I mean, that's also Lovecraftian. I'm glad you mentioned Lovecraft because, a lot of times he uses the term boogeyman sometimes, or bogeyman, as they say in Britain across the pond, although Lovecraft he was a New England gentleman, but in that time, I think the gentlemen, and I do mean the nobility class in New England, I don't think they really quite considered themselves not Londoners just yet, or they were still British nobility. But yeah, the bogeymen were usually black and wild-eyed and curly hair, and even when he talked about a human back then, they used the term Negro. They were usually a frightening, scary, or simpleton character, and I guess, is one person. It's Lovecraft. I mean, but. He wrote that way. I don't think he was speaking only for himself at the time. And I think Lovecraft's a wonderful writer with an amazing imagination and a great grasp of literature. That doesn't mean that he didn't have, horrible prejudices that don't, pass any sort of smell tests for the last, 40, 50, years. And his fans acknowledge that. And, anyway, I'm going to move along now.
So we're going to jump all the way from 1934 over the swinging 60s to 1970 and talk about Santa Claus is coming to town, which is, one of the things that's changed about television over the last 15 years or whatever is we don't have... you're not limited in terms of what's on anymore. I mean, you can stream whatever you want at any time, which is wonderful in a way, but it also, I remember being a kid and being in the school recess yard and being really excited and talking to people because this particular Christmas show was coming on Tuesday night and this one was coming on Thursday night, and you would get really excited. And this was one of the shows, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, Rudolph, like all of those things, they would come on the different networks. And that was the only time of the year you would get to watch it. So it was like an exciting event.
There were other things too. Like where I live, there were certain cartoons that would come around that really had nothing to do with Christmas or Thanksgiving necessarily, but like Gulliver's Travels would come on that time of year, the cartoon version. Mm-hmm. Last of the Mohicans would come once a year. By the way, they're still Mohicans now, so it certainly wasn't the last of the Mohicans. Yeah, you're right. That was where there was appointment TV. Now, like, the only appointment TV is the NFL. God bless it.
And even that, you can watch like old games all of the time, but.
I'm not that kind of fan. I'm just not. I'm just not watching old football games. I'm not doing it.
I'm not watching any of them.
Yeah.
This show, first of all, it's Rankin Bass, which they are famous for a certain style, a certain look. They did animation too, but they are really famous for the stop action stuff.
Right.
And this is stop action. Which is where, if you're not familiar with it, you literally have sort of little dolls that would be manipulated, and then you would take a picture of them in each little pose, and then you would put all the pictures together, and you would have, like, if you've ever seen those flip books of cartoons where you flip the pages and the little drawing starts to move, that's the same idea.
Yeah, Gumby style, Harryhausen, Sinbad, and Greek mythology movies, the original Clash of the Titans, all the same style. Yeah, same method.
Yeah. I think that all by itself is a little jarring. So there's that. But the story itself, this is very much a Cold War picture. Just like summary wise, it's the story supposedly of how Santa Claus came to be Santa Claus. And he starts out by being a baby who's abandoned, and he is adopted by a family of toy-making elves, the Kringles, and he comes to be known as Kris Kringle. And they live on the opposite side of a mountain, the Mountain of the Whispering Winds, which all of this looks very much like East and West Berlin. I mean, honestly. And the Kringles, they want to get their toys to Sombertown, which is on the other side of the mountain. And Sombertown is ruled by the Burgermeister, Meisterburger. Not at all, German sounding. The Burgermeister, Meisterburger is exactly the sort of character that his name sounds like. He's got this big jutting chin, and he's wearing lederhosen, and he's got the big side, like the Martin Van Buren sideburns, and he's a nasty character. He's nasty because he wants all of the children, and he talks a very thick German accent. He wants all of the children in the town to get busy doing their chores. They have to wash out their socks every day, and not to be playing with any toys. Toys, in fact, are banned in the town of Sombertown. They go to school, they come home, they wash their socks, they go to bed. And Chris manages to get across the mountain with his bag of toys. There's a penguin who becomes his friend.
Well, sure.
And
the indigenous German penguin.
Yeah. And the children are very happy to suddenly have toys. And the Burgermeister actually trips and falls on one of these forbidden toys and breaks his leg, for which he punishes the entire town.
That's leadership.
And the parents, one of the things that's really interesting in this show, I think, is the way that the parents react to all of this, because the parents respond by being very afraid that the toys are going to be discovered and get them all in trouble. That the neighbors are going to report that toys were found in the next door house.
Right, very, very Diary of Anne Frank.
Very much. And there are a couple of trips across the mountain. There's a wizard. There's a wizard who initially is very evil and very tall, who wants to keep Chris from getting across the mountain for reasons that are never really explained. He's just sort of an evil wizard who's there, but Chris wins him over. At one point he loses his magic powers because I guess when you become a good person, you are no longer powerful.
Who, the wizard or Chris?
This is the wizard.
Okay, so it's not Superman 2. It's the wizard.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Chris doesn't have any magic powers except that the wizard at a certain point explains why it is that Kris Kringle can fly his sled, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, good. Science. I'm looking forward to this.
And the whole thing is sort of a way of explaining all of the different things that we have come to associate with Santa Claus, although there's no Coca-Cola. So this is not the Coca-Cola Santa Claus per se, but it explains why Chris wears a red suit because...
Listeners to this show know that it's because of the mushrooms that made the shamans, reach spiritual realms were red with little white dots on them, and so their robes match the colors. That's where the red and white comes from.
But according to this show, it's the elves. They happen to wear little red suits, and so Chris wears the red suit of his people.
You can't fight fashion.
There's a character who is named Jessica, who becomes the love interest of Chris.
Ooh, spicy.
She very incongruously is wearing this Edwardian attire. They never explain why she's wearing a bustle, basically.
Okay, what is Edwardian attire and what's a bustle?
If you watch the cartoon, she's wearing a dress that looks. If you ever heard of the Gibson Girls, or if you watch period films that are set in the late 19th century.
Oh.
They were dresses that had a very tight, cinched-in waistline, and then you wore a bustle, which
Okay, so
highlighted your hips, it highlighted your butt. I mean, basically, it gave you a big skirt.
Okay, so we're talking more Outlander and less Downton Abbey.
Yes.
Okay. We got to go with references that sadly I get.
Anyway, she's dressed like that for reasons that are unclear. But she's Kris Kringle's love interest, and she happens also to be the teacher to the children who live in Somber Town.
Aww.
And initially, she is trying to keep the toys from getting in. She's sort of working with the government.
Isn't the damsel in distress oftentimes a teacher teaching children?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, a spinster. She's a little bit of a spinster at the beginning.
Well, you start the maid and you become the mother, then you become the crone. Especially if you skip the mother part.
She winds up falling for Chris.
Of course.
There's a song. I mean, I think all of the movies that we're talking about today are musicals.
Mm-hmm.
There are songs in all of them, which I think also contributes to the weirdness overall of the effect of these films, because in real life, no one stops and breaks into song, nobody stops and breaks into a dance number, but in all of these movies, they're musicals.
That's why Cop Rock never worked.
Say it again?
That's why Cop Rock was a failure. And Joker du Folie, or Folie do, or whatever, Joker 2. Don't watch Joker 2. I beseech you, don't do that to yourself. You don't deserve it.
That's very bad.
It's
I didn't see the first one.
It's not as bad when there's no singing, but they're singing 66% of the time, and the not as bad should not be confused with good.
Okay. Anyway, Chris and Jessica fall in love. They get married in a wedding that is attended by forest animals.
Very Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
Very Cinderella. I mean, entirely appropriate.
At one point, Chris is captured.
Was the penguin the best man in his tuxedo?
I don't remember.
Okay, well.
I remember the penguin honks. Like, I remember that the penguin honks at various points.
So maybe northern penguins are like a breed of geese?
Eventually, the whole sort of evil Meisterburger regime just disappears in a way that isn't ever really explained. They just kind of die out in the picture. There's no armed revolution. There's no fall of a wall, but the regime just goes away. I think in 1970, when they were making this, they probably couldn't picture how it was going to happen.
They couldn't do like their heart melting, so the characters actually melted?
Well, that's Frosty.
Or they all became like the wizard and all of a sudden became nice?
Well, I mean, that's really what should have happened.
I
don't think...
Wait, if I remember correctly, didn't the wizard become nice because Chris presented him with the toy he always wanted as a young child? So he won him over. So they didn't want to repeat that trope, even though it's supposed to be a children's story, and repeating, plot devices is sort of a hallmark of children's stories?
Maybe. But yeah, Kris Kringle gave him a little choo-choo train that he had always wanted.
Or just get rid of... I guess maybe it was a Cold War movie. Just get rid of the fascists. Just get rid of the communist blight.
It became good once he received a form of mass transit efficient transportation.
Okay.
But the wizard has lost his powers once he was no longer evil, except that he is able at some point to conjure enough magic to make Chris's sleigh flyable.
Sacrifice. Sacrifice is part of the hero's journey. Now, Kristen sacrificed, but the wizard sacrificed. The guide, the Virgil, the Merlin. It's beautiful, really, if you think about it. So the wizard gave Chris some limited magical powers, and do they grow with every heart that Chris cures?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
But then he just sort of falls out of the story at that point.
The wizard
There's really no further reference to the Winter Wizard.
Well, his role was done. He could go to the mists of Avalon, be beyond the Wuthering Mountains or the Whispering Hills. He could retreat to his hermitage or his underground lair, or, maybe he found a nice wizardess.
Be seduced by Orgain.
Maybe that's where all the Burgermeisters, formerly evil minions, went to, and they were all hanging out with the wizard and subterranean, awesomeness. Mm-hmm. They were the Dave and Buster's Meister. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm stopping, I promise. I'm done.
You wanted to talk about the Island of Misfit Toys.
Yeah, Year Without a Santa Claus. Yes.
Which is from sort of the companion story to Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, but is the Rudolph origin story. How is it that Rudolph came to lead Santa's sleigh?
And Baby New Year, and basically Guardians of the Galaxy 3 stole this plot, or at least part of it.
Mm-hmm. One that I did not see.
People will tell you that it's great. They're wrong. It's not.
Okay. I like the first one.
The first one is terrific. The second one is adequate. The third one made a lot of money.
Not so good.
But part of the MCU's ongoing decline, not an exception. Not a feature. It was part of the bug. It was just a less big bug than some of the others. All right. Enough about me and the MCU. That can be other shows, though. I'd be happy to do that with you at some point. But yeah, the Misfit toys, they were all basically, disabled toys. They were broken toys, and, so they were discarded. They were on an island where no kids wanted them.
Mm-hmm. Well, by the time we get to Rudolph, which sounds like the start of something that would be sung at Woodstock, by the time we get to Rudolph...
69, not 99 or 96 or whatever.
Santa is no longer like young, red-headed Kris Kringle. He is old, fat, and grumpy and cranky.
Like me.
And the North Pole has become a place where people who are a little different are bullied and excluded, which is very discouraging.
So the Burgermeister, Meisterburger, rubbed off on Kris after all.
It seems like it. It seems like the philosophy colonized the other. One philosophy colonized the other. But
can you colonize the North Pole if nobody lived there?
Well, you could argue that Santa did.
I'm starting to think so. But you can colonize a heart and mind. So
Yeah.
When you have a pause, that means I made you think, and that's probably not a good thing.
I want to talk about the Island of Misfit Toys.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. So, you know that in the story, Rudolph leaves because all of the other reindeer and Santa are all making fun of his red nose.
Mm-hmm.
And Rudolph goes off on his journey and at some point arrives at this island that is inhabited by toys that no other children want. There's a train that has square wheels. There's a water gun that shoots jelly.
Mm.
There's a dolly, but I don't remember what's wrong with the dolly, actually.
He painted crazy pictures.
Yeah. And these are the toys that, like, something went wrong with them in Santa's workshop. And all of this sounds very much like the tradition in fairy tale myth-telling about either children that have been stolen by fairies and replaced by changelings,
mm-hmm.
Or mythologies that developed around children who have disabilities, babies who have disabilities.
Right. Cursed by demons, or eaten by Democrats in a Georgetown pizza place that has no basement.
In a pizza parlor.
Right. Right.
So...
Sorry, satanic Democrats, I should be clear.
So, there's a king of this island who's a lion.
Of course.
Like, off the top of my head, sounds a little Aslan-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the story's resolution, Rudolph has promised that he will bring Santa back to collect all of the misfit toys, and Santa will deliver them to children who will love them, which is what ends up happening. Which is a very strange sort of message to give to children, that if there is something about them that is not exactly like the rest of the community around them, that A, there is something wrong with them and they should be isolated, and B, that someone should swoop in and redistribute them somewhere. So that's the island of misfit toys.
It is a little creepy and a little bit concerning, but all in the end, I mean, just like Rudolph, they all learn to be appreciated. I tell you, the water gun that squirts jelly, I could think of lots of uses for it, including making awesome peanut butter and jelly hoagies. So, I mean,
it's going to stain everything. I'm coming at this from a mother who has had to clean up after children.
I mean, isn't that what the good Lord made wax paper for?
Yeah. But children are not going to shoot it just at the wax paper.
Who's saying anything about children?
I mean, maybe that's part of it, is that part of these stories are not really completely for children. And on some level, they're for the adults who will be watching with the children.
Maybe. It's hard. I'm just not sure that people thought that much about it. I mean, listen, some of it is, I am not deriding the concept of woke, but the way woke culture is morphed into or is derided, when we revisit anything, we're not like allowed to enjoy it. Like Bugs Bunny is racist. Woody Woodpecker is this, and some of the Jungle Book is, and you know what? It is. It's also just a story. Tarzan, racist. Yes, in fact, it is. But as long as you realize that it's also just a story. But it's the saying it's just a story in itself is maybe troubling. I mean, but I feel like everything needs an exposition and like a whole essay before you can just go in and watch something and not think about it again. Do we? Jessica Rabbit is troubling. I mean, but I don't know. But
I don't disagree with you. I think what we're talking about are things that make us uncomfortable. And the question is, what do we do in the presence of something that makes us uncomfortable? I mean, do you sit in the presence of the thing that makes you uncomfortable, or do you push it away and pretend it doesn't exist?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you make a lot of progress if you push it away and pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I don't think that we all have to have the same line. I mean, if some people can't get past the whatever imagery they see in Bugs Bunny and they don't watch, it's fine. If I just think that Daffy Duck is funny and Bugs Bunny is super cool, then that should be okay too. That said, I mean, having people play in blackface, is something I think we almost all can agree is unacceptable. I don't know, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is nothing that everybody can agree upon.
There is. This is not a Christmas story in particular, but there were a series of stories that were written by a white man who took stories that were based on stories that enslaved people brought with them to America from Africa, and that were based on characters from stories in the African cultures that came to America. And I mean, part of why we condemn these stories, A, is because this was a white man who was profiting on telling these stories. He published them as books. They became beloved books. I read them growing up. They were turned into a Disney movie called The Song of the South that no one watches anymore. And I don't think that it's sold anymore because it has these awful stereotypical characters in it. But the underlying stories, which are the stories of Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox and Brer Bear, are stories of characters that are wise and funny and entertaining. They're wrapped in these things that make us feel uncomfortable. but the heart of the stories themselves have value. And I am always, I can't tell you the number of times, there's a story in here. One of the characters is Brer Rabbit, and Brer Rabbit lives in a briar patch. And he gets himself into trouble. He has all of these sorts of adventures, but his kind of enemy in this universe is Brer Fox, because Brer Fox wants to eat him.
Sure.
And Brer Fox, at one point, I don't remember exactly what has happened, and I think this happens repeatedly, honestly, where Brer Fox at one point wants to punish the rabbit for something that the rabbit has done. And he says he's going to throw him in the briar patch, and Brer Rabbit sort of chuckles to himself and says, "Oh, please, Mr. Fox, don't throw me in the briar patch. Whatever you do, don't throw me there," because that's where he lives. That's exactly what he wants him to do, to throw him in the briar patch. And I cannot tell you the number of times I've had some sort of conversation with somebody, an argument with somebody, where they make some point that they don't realize they're actually telling me something that I would love for them to do. And I always want to say, "Oh, please don't throw me in the briar patch," in response to this. It's the perfect response. But I am very aware of the fact that these stories are problematic for all of these reasons, and so I don't. And I feel a little sad about that, on some level, because I think that we're losing something by our unwillingness to sort of grapple with some of these things that we're talking about.
Right.
These stories, the core of them, have enormous value, and we ought to figure out a way to use them.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, maybe Jordan Peele can make the movies and reclaim them. I'm just naming him because he's a prominent director right now who most of his movies are pretty goddamn good, so he'd probably do it justice. I'm not saying he's the only. Donald Glover Jr. can probably do anything. So anyway, enough of my worship of Donald Glover Jr., which I try to sneak into wherever I can. Though it might be the first time on this show, but all right. Anyone who's known me for a while can vouch that I'm sort of in awe of that man. Anyway, moving on. So the Rudolph the Reindeer, Red-Nosed Reindeer and Island of Misfit Toys, sort of terrible. What else we got there?
So I want to talk about. I knew it as a book. It was also made into a TV film in 1969. So we're not completely jumping over the 60s, but it's called The Littlest Angel.
Mm-hmm.
The book was written in 1946 by Charles Tazewell. I grew up with it. It was one of my favorite books growing up. Honestly, when I was in law school, I took a trial advocacy class, and my closing argument in this case that we handled as part of my trial advocacy class, I based on this book in something that I would probably never actually do in a courtroom, but I did it in law school. I loved the book growing up, but it is a really weird way of dealing with children who die, and sort of puts this holiday gloss on it. So the story is, and the book and the movie that were made, the made-for-television movie that were made, differ in a lot of ways, as often happens when you take a children's book and adapt it for the screen. I mean, realistically, if you took most children's books and tried to turn them into movies, you'd have 10 minutes or 15 minutes of material, so they've got to write in a lot of new material, and that's what they did in 1969 with this. So the book is the story of, I think, a 4 or 5-year-old boy who is like a mischievous little kid who dies at a young age and winds up in heaven as an angel. And he keeps getting in trouble in heaven. He doesn't do the things that he's supposed to do. It talks about him like screwing up at choir practice. He's always running late. His heavenly robes are always dirty and dusty. He won't wear shoes. He won't comb his hair. All of these little things that apparently you were supposed to do in heaven to go along and get along, and he won't do them. And the other angels don't like him for that reason, and in fact are always kind of trying to discipline him, tell him he needs to shape up or ship out, and he's always getting in trouble. And finally, in the book, one of the angels takes him aside and says, you know, what is causing you to behave this way? Is there something that we could do that would help you? And the little boy says that what he really wants is to have this box that he kept on Earth under his bed, that he had all of his little precious belongings in. He would like to have this box. And they arranged for him to get it. And inside the box are these things that a little boy would have and would like. There's a collar from a beloved pet that's in the box. There's like a stone that he collected from the river, you know, these little things. And he loves this. He loves the little items. And now suddenly he's behaving very well. Now that he has his box, he's a happy little angel in heaven. And then Jesus is born in Bethlehem. And this is sort of the first sign in the book, the first understanding you have that this is taking place in biblical times, because otherwise it looks all very modern. And so when Jesus is born, everyone is thinking about what kinds of gifts to bring, and the angels are coming up with, you know, all of these fabulous gemstones and gold and precious things. And the littlest angel, like the little drummer boy, approaches the manger and brings with him his little box and gives the Christ child his little box. And God is so happy with all of this that the little rough box of things rises up into the sky and becomes the Star of Bethlehem.
Aww.
The book, I mean, that's basically the book. The 69 made-for-television movie, first of all, which stars Johnny Whitaker, who played the character of Jody in Family Affair.
Okay. Hate that kid.
So picture little red-headed kid with freckles, very cute. The movie starts off with this little boy living as like a shepherd in what looks like a biblical town, except that the house that he lives in looks very much like a ranch house. I mean, it's very weird. Like, they very clearly took a house that they had on a set somewhere and slapped some rough boards on it and called that a house in Bethlehem. He dies in this movie by climbing or trying to climb up to the top of a cliff to grab a bird and then falls off the cliff. It's very jarring, the scene of this small child dying. And once he gets to heaven, apparently the network for whom this was made would not allow them to show an angel misbehaving or being disciplined by other angels. So
because the Bible has nothing about that in it at all.
Sorry?
Because the Bible has nothing about that at all.
Well, no, of course. So you lose all of the kind of dramatic tension. I mean, suddenly there's really no reason for this boy to do any of the things that he does in the book. There are musical numbers. Cab Calloway plays one of the angels. Tony Randall plays a particularly grumpy angel. Connie Stevens is in it. E.G. Marshall plays God. There are musical numbers. And it resolves the same way with him presenting his box to the baby Jesus. But you lose all of the sort of reason for him to do any of the things that he does in the book, because you lose him misbehaving. And then what you wind up with is, at least in the musical from the 60s, is the story of a child who dies and is rejected by the other angels in heaven for no reason. And that's it. And then there's a bunch of songs and singing.
Okay. Well, you know, that's terrific. I think Little Angels are nice, but, you know, I am also troubled by that angels thought that the Son of God, the Messiah, would need earthly things like gold and jewels and whatever, but that's probably not the point of it. I mean, obviously they were just there to contrast the littlest angel and having the pure heart gift.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I mean, stupid angels, not very creative.
Nah.
I mean, that's
thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, that's functionally the equivalent of getting someone an Amazon gift card now, which, by the way, is awesome, but it's not really thoughtful. I mean, it's nice. Everyone could use it, but it's not. It's like you didn't really think of me unless you're trying to give me a gift, because I'm really hard to shop for. But anyway, but I digress. But if anyone wants to give me gifts and you want suggestions, I do have a list that I'm happy to supply to you. So, you know, and that's staying in. Don't edit that out. All right. What else is on the list of troubling and creepy Christmas stuff?
All right, well, I saved this one for last.
Okay.
Because this one is this is an acid trip of a children's movie. I mean, there's no other way of describing it. I actually, for years, remembered watching this as a kid and couldn't figure out what it was. And only within the last, 5 years or so, figured out and found it. And it's available on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube from start to finish. And that picture is Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure from 1977.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to this.
This is, when I called it an acid trip of a picture, I mean that in a really literal sense. I mean, there are things that happen in this movie that make no rational sense. They are not attempting to justify the choices that they made as being rational. There are a lot of colors, a lot of things swirling around on the screen. It's a weird movie, and it's also a musical. I mean, there are a number of song and dance numbers that are performed by these animated dolls. So if you are a person who indulges in mind-altering substances, this is one either to definitely check out while under the influence of said substances, or to avoid while under the influence of said substances.
If I'm not mistaken, this is around the time of the Yellow Submarine, that Beatles psychedelic cartoon movie as well. Yeah. So that was sort of the vogue then. You had a lot of the early Sid and Marty Krofft stuff, like H.R. Puffin stuff, and I forget the other names, but that was sort of thing. I mean, one movie, it's not really a Christmas movie, but I'm not sure that it's not, but definitely is a creepy children's movie. Both the original and the remake, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or whatever the real name is. I mean, exceptionally creepy. And like all of these sort of involve like, you know, sort of slumlord type of situations and strange adult characters. But Willy Wonka he's psychotic. I mean, he's like almost Dexter without. Well, I was going to say without actually killing anyone, but I think he sort of did. Did like at least like a few of those kids die in that little Hunger Games of a contest to get chocolate?
It's left vague, but I mean, you have to sort of assume that blowing up into a blueberry is not going to do good things for your anatomy.
I would think. I mean, you know, unless you're the MCU and you think that when a celestial cracks the Earth's core and mantle, that a woman transmuting it into ivory or something somehow reverses that. The Earth is not a bathtub. You can't caulk it. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. That was an unrelated rant. But yeah, Willy Wonka. I mean, listen, Wizard of Oz is weird, but it's not that weird. I mean, like Through the Looking Glass is weird, but it's like I think it's like intended to be weird. Like that's why I really want to get someone who knows, like, I keep saying Grimm's Fairy Tales and Hans Christian Andersen. I'm sure there's a million, I mean, I know that's Lewis Carroll. I'm sure there's a million different authors, and I'm just lumping them into, you know, these two names. I mean, you know, the Wizard of Oz was Baum, I think was his last name. But I don't know, that's just like all this weird shit, and I know that all these things were to try to keep kids to behave and keep them out of the woods and, you know, not do certain things, but you know, they're all snapshots in time. I don't know, but I mean, doing weird non-holiday fare is probably fair game as well. F-A-R-E versus F-A-I-R used in that sentence, just for those scoring at home, or even if you're alone.
I think there's something, some of the weirdness that we react to in some of these stories, like Lewis Carroll, is our sense that this is an adult who thinks that he is writing something, telling a story for children in this very like childlike, wondery way, but is still an adult. And there's this awareness of things that are important to adults that's floating around in the background of these stories, and it's all mixed up with the kind of childhood wonder and naivete in a way that we find disturbing.
Yeah.
These things shouldn't be mixed.
I mean, I think to an extent it's sort of a holdover of retellings of like Norse myths and other stories that had to make their way through Christian, well then Catholic censors, and so everyone comes off as a little silly and cartoonish, as opposed to heroic and sort of dark and serious, and I think that's what sort of pervades and lasts, and probably still lasts today, though probably a little less so, which maybe is one of the good things of again the original woke is that's sort of popped, but yeah, some this was a drug trip. This was scary. I mean, it can be interpreted in so many different ways through the looking glass and back again and whatnot. These are very layered stories, and I'm just not sure that the adults who were watching with the kids got it any better than the kids did, which is fine. I mean, there's something said for just enjoying something, seeing it through your children's eyes or even your own, and not having to super analyze everything. I mean, there is something like just popping popcorn, just eating popcorn and enjoying yourself. I mean, you live once, or at least as far as we know. But there are, again, there's troubling and creepy aspects, and maybe maybe we have to look at things with a second eye and at least, let our kids know. Maybe, just so that Tarzan probably wouldn't have done that well in the jungle.
Well, I think when we're consuming a story, watching a movie, reading a book, we expect there to be some rational connection between the thing that happens here and the thing that happens here. I mean, we want to make sense of it. We want to understand why something has happened. Or even if something happens for no good reason, we want it to be very clear from the narrative that this thing is happening for sort of no good reason, that it is a random thing that could not be accounted for. We want to be in familiar territory in that way.
Right, like The Sopranos with the Pine Barrens, where the Russian mobster runs off into the Pine Barrens, and for 4.5 seasons we're waiting for him to show up again here, and we never hear a word about it.
Yeah. But this is a story that just takes all of that and turns it on its head. I mean, there is no reason for any of the things that happen. There's no reason for this character to exist or that character. It's all just kind of assembled onto the celluloid and presented to you very colorfully. And I mean, the way that LSD works is it interferes with the way that your nerves communicate with one another. It stops the railroad basically between your spine and your brain.
All right.
And I think on some level that is what this movie does. I mean, there is no reason for the things that happen, and you're just watching and waiting for it to end.
Okay.
So, if you have not seen this movie, or if you don't know who Raggedy Ann and Andy are, they're two rag dolls. They're rag dolls who were created as characters in, I think, the early 20th century. So they were old characters, even by 1977 when they made this cartoon. They live in a nursery with a little girl named Marcella. And the plot of this, to the extent that there is a plot, is that it's Marcella's birthday. Like Toy Story, these toys all come alive when Marcella is not around. When Marcella is in the room, they're inert. But when she's not around, they have this very sort of rich life, and they sing and they dance and they have adventures, all within the nursery. For Marcella's birthday, she is sent a beautiful and elegant doll from Paris. who, when Marcella leaves the room, comes alive, and turns out this doll, whose name is Babette, is very snobby. She doesn't want to be in the nursery with these American scum dolls, and makes it very clear that she doesn't want to be in the nursery. Meanwhile, there's a pirate who lives in a snow globe,
of course,
in the nursery. The pirate sneezes a lot, and so his name is Captain Contagious. The pirate falls in love with Babette, and on his pirate ship escapes from the snow globe, kidnaps Babette, and leaps out of the nursery window. Raggedy Ann and Andy, who, let me tell you, another thing about this film that is very strange is when Raggedy Ann and Andy were initially written as characters by their creator, they were a brother and a sister, these two dolls, and they had a relationship of being brother and sister. At some point in the story, and there were books, there were various cartoons before 1977. At some point in the story, that was changed to make them boyfriend and girlfriend. They had a romantic relationship. The people who wrote this story seemed like they wanted to have them do both. And so you have a story in which these two were ostensibly brother and sister, but they're really kissy.
Listen, that's royalty and divinity. I mean, that's literally older than Adam and Eve, who, by the way, were brother and sister, or at least clones. So, it's
creepy. It's really kind of creepy.
Well, so is pretty much all of our origin stories from all of our cosmology. So, dig it, sucker.
It's Games of Thrones. There's an aspect of Games of Thrones and the Targaryens in Raggedy Ann and Andy in the story.
Lannisters too.
Sorry.
Lannisters too. Not as much as the Targaryens, but in some way
there is a Lannistarian king that we'll talk about, I think.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the Lannisters in some way were trying to recreate a new Targaryens by doing that, sort of how they justified it, but they just were horny for each other.
They were trying to buy themselves the cachet that you got by being a Targaryen.
Sure. By always paying their debts.
The Lannisters are new money. The Targaryens are old.
Oh, that's true. Very good. Yeah.
So Anne and Andy decide that they're going to go rescue Babette, despite the fact that Babette has just basically given them the middle finger and told them that she doesn't want to be there. They jump out of the nursery, and we are suddenly in a universe that does not resemble any kind of reality. I mean, the movie starts in a house in a recognizable American-looking neighborhood with trees and sidewalks, and there's a school bus, and we are suddenly like on another planet, and none of this is explained. They're in this woods, but everything is blue or green. It's very like 70s basement psychedelic. And then they have a series of adventures while they search for Babette. They run into a knight who tells these very punny jokes. There's a camel who has wrinkly knees and looks very much like Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh stories. What is a camel? And they come into contact with the king, who I was saying is a little bit Lannistarian, who's this very short guy. He has a Napoleonic complex. His name is King Cuckoo, and King Cuckoo wants to get bigger, but he can only get bigger if he makes fun of other people and everyone laughs.
Gotcha.
Eventually, they find Babette, and they are able to return everyone to the nursery, but what happens before then, and what everyone remembers from this movie, and is what I always remembered from this movie, like sort of the remnants of a bad dream, is they land in a taffy pit, and they wind up kind of floating around in this taffy pit, except that the taffy pit is alive. It is a sentient taffy pit. And the sentient taffy pit has this face that kind of comes in and out of its like gooey taffiness, and its face has candy teeth and these weird sort of candy eyes, and it keeps trying to eat them in their boat because Raggedy Ann, if you did not know, has a heart inside her that is a candy heart, and it wants to eat Raggedy Ann's heart.
Ooh.
And the name of this character is the Greedy. And
says it
the
all.
Greedy is, I think, the weirdest, absolute F word of a character that I have ever seen on in any media that I can think of, honestly. And on some level, I think that the Greedy is responsible for a lot of eating disorders within girls of my age. Because the Greedy just talks about he's consuming candy, and he wants more and more and more. He's kind of, if you've ever seen the legends of these Eastern ideas of ghosts who cannot be satisfied, who are hungry ghosts and constantly looking for things to fill themselves up. That's kind of what he's been written to do.
Sure. I am a little bit fascinated by the difference between sort of, again, we're putting a border where it's probably not this hard, or fixed by, I don't mean hard as in difficult, I mean hard as in fixed, between Western ideas of ghosts and Eastern ideas of ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably another show topic I should explore with someone.
That's Raggedy Ann and Andy. The one thing that I want to sort of add about the movie, if you follow any of the sort of the culture around anti-vaccination culture,
go for it.
People.
Still Garden of Doom.
Raggedy Ann has been adopted as a symbol for anti-vax philosophy, to the extent that it is a philosophy. And that is because, apparently, there are all sorts of stories as to how the writer of these books, who is a man, came up with the idea for Raggedy Ann, like what the source of these stories is. And one of the possible origin stories is, and this did happen, is that the writer's daughter was given a smallpox vaccine, supposedly without her father's consent. He did not know that she was going to be vaccinated. She got the vaccine, and then she died. It looks like she did not die directly as a result of the vaccine itself or anything having to do with smallpox, but that the site where she got the injection became infected, and she became septic and died. But anyway, Raggedy Ann has been adopted as at least one of the symbols for the anti-vax movement.
Okay. Well, you're going to correct the record now, are you not?
The record is she didn't die because of the vaccination. She died because it sounds like they didn't take good care, parents maybe didn't take good care of the site where she received the shot, and it got infected.
But isn't it also, forgive me, but I think I read your PDF, and I think that you pointed out how the author applied for the patent and received it prior to her death. So he had already envisioned Raggedy Andy, Raggedy Andy, Raggedy Ann. He envisioned them already in their existing form that we knew them then and know them now, prior to any of the vaccine kerfuffle, whether or not you blame the vaccine, the infection, or whatever. One thing had nothing to do with the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. He filed for his U.S. patent for the design. That's another thing. Anyway, he filed his request for the patent in 1915 before she died at the age of 13 from the infection. This is also sort of a very early example of monetizing a character from a story.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very good marketer. He, along with these books that he started writing in the early 20th century, he was designing the dolls that would be sold to go with the books. And they were very popular toys. So people were purchasing the Raggedy Ann dolls, the Andy dolls. They were being commodified along with the stories. The stories were kind of selling the dolls. And that was an early example of that. He was maybe one of the first people to think to do that.
Yeah. Now movies are generally not, green lit unless you can sell all sorts of toys and video games and all sorts of merchandise along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely true. So a bit of a pioneer there. But I do think that the chronology of him applying for and getting the patent before she had any vaccine and or died is actually more determinative on argument's sake than the nuance of that she didn't die directly from the vaccine. It's just that it had nothing to do with the inspiration of the character, and that he not only already designed it but applied for and received the patent prior to any of those items happening.
Yeah. The other possible origin story is his daughter went up into his mother's attic and found like a rag doll and brought it down, and the rag doll became her toy. It became Raggedy Ann.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know Raggedy Ann, Andy and Raggedy Ann, I mean, first of all, you've probably already Googled it, but I mean, basically, they're like kid versions of scarecrows, and they're supposed to be, sort of poor kids, the sort of like little Orphan Annie, little redheads with, little simple dresses and not bonnets, but sort of like ribbon lacing, piping, cheap stuff where because they couldn't afford the fancy Babette-like dresses. So they were for the everyman, and like Kris Kringle, they were gingers. They were redheads. So there's something here about gingers in Christmas stories. Maybe it's the spice, but pumpkin spice is also a little orange. I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting too into psychedelic and analysis of color choices. All right. Well, this was definitely creepy and concerning and largely Christmassy, if not directly, but proximately to when these items came out. Now, I want the world to know that Jennifer is not a Grinch. In fact, she is wearing, maybe purposely, maybe not, a shirt that says "Merry Merry Christmas" on it. She's a celebrant. I am not. I am, of course, wearing a Shane Taylor Promotions shirt, and if you don't know what that's about, that probably means you're normal, so don't worry about it. Yes, it's pro wrestling, sorry. I'm not sorry, screw you. Anyway, Jennifer, you have anything that you want to plug, or if you want people to find and follow you, or if you don't want people to find and follow you, this is your chance.
Well, you can find me on my website, which is jenniferasutherland.com. You'll find links to my book there and some of my publications there, and occasionally I post links to events where I'm going to appear or give talks. And then that will link to my social media too, if you have any interest in finding me there. Excellent.
And any of you, I'm not going to repeat the announcements again. If you somehow missed it, just go back to the beginning and listen to it again. It's nothing earth-shattering, at least I hope that it's not, because I hope that it can be seamless as I think it will be. If not, then there'll be other announcements. Anyway, if you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook. Garden of Doom has a Facebook page, not a group. I'm on the X at two places. There's Icarus Fell MD, which is a little bit more variety, a little bit more benign, a little bit somewhat dormant, and then there's at Dose Evil, which is almost exclusively wrestling nonsense, but certainly more active. And you can hear me, read me typing insightful things like F off. And things like that. So if you want more of that, at Dose Evil. If you're here by accident, or you just really love Jennifer and you never came to hear her content on the show before, hopefully you like it enough and you'll just subscribe to Garden of Doom. You get 3 shows. You'll get Garden of Doom in this form and its next, which is this kind of variety, these kinds of conversations with all sorts of different people, from people that I know in real life who are subject matter experts, to New York Times best-selling authors, people who have made major films, Emmy Award winners, you name it. Professors. I think I've had at least 3 professors who have actually done the great courses. They're the ones that you hear their voices presenting the great courses. So all sorts of cool stuff there. Garden Views is a little bit more grounded in that it's more legal, business, tech, science, a little bit of variety in there, some entertainment law, some realpolitik. Sometimes the shows overlap a little bit. And GOD presents The Book of Black is me and PJ Black, who's a professional wrestler of 26 years. If you remember WWE, a group called The Nexus, and a group called The Core, which was just a part of The Nexus. He was Justin Gabriel for those 5 years in WWE. And it's he and I, that's why it's called Book of Black, because his name's PJ Black, talking to two people in and around wrestling about Garden of Doom stuff. And when he's not available, I have substitute co-hosts. So far, Mr. Thomas from Major League Wrestling has been both a guest and a substitute co-host. So when it's him, I call it the Gospel of Thomas. And theoretically, there are two other substitute co-hosts also from the wrestling world as well. So you get all three of those shows. Good times are guaranteed, and they're all free. There's no Patreon, there's no Super Chats, there's no merchandise, nothing. I'm not asking you to huck anything, just subscribe. If you want, give a review, hopefully a good review, tell your friends, refer. And the next thing you're going to hear is going to be, just like I remember when I was a young child listening to the radio station commercials in New York City, that was playing like a rock, they had a guy at a toll booth, and they interviewed him. Will you listen to 97.1? I'm making up the call sign, the number. And he said, you play Tchaikovsky. And you're going to hear Tchaikovsky. That's what the whole story will to. And it's going to be, yes, March of the Wooden Soldiers. All right, everyone. Thank you to our guest, Jennifer Sutherland. Thank you for listening. And hopefully you'll listen again. And you'll hear from us later in the week. See y'all.